Hey guys, it's Ed from LUCIDPIXUL and welcome back. Today's a little bit different, so if you're new to the channel, my name's Adam Duff. I'm a professional fantasy illustrator, concept artist, and teacher, and I've been working in the industry for around 25 years or so, so yes, I'm kind of old. And I've been working as a teacher for 15 of those years, 10 of which have been my own online private art mentorship. So if you're new to the channel, welcome aboard. And today is a Q&A, which is something I don't do very often. I reached out to the community because there are a lot of things that I do art talks about. And if you're not familiar with the art talks, I do these weekly or bi-weekly videos where I talk about different facets of the industry, very often tapping on the more psychological and personal sides of navigating an art career, which are more involved topics. But I get tons of questions and topics come up very often that I find particularly interesting, but might not necessarily fit into my longer form art talks, because my art talks tend to be a little bit longer. But I really wanted to get to them. So a lot of you chimed in and I reached out to the community on the community tab and I asked for questions, and you guys really jumped to the occasion. And every single one of these questions are bangers. I want to answer every single one of them, but I had to shortlist it to the questions that I felt I could answer more efficiently. So if there are questions that require a little bit more from me, I might end up actually making an art talk out of them. I did not ignore your question. It's just something that I feel I can't quite address in short form like this. Okay, because I don't want to spend too much time on each one, but these are all amazing questions. So thank you a lot for these questions. First question is by Wendigo Dude, which right off the bat is a great name because I love the Wendigo. I do a lot of folklore-ish, dark folklore fantasy illustrations, and I've done 2 Wendigos so far. It's actually, I realize it's actually a Canadian-based folklore, which is pretty cool because I'm Canadian. Oh yeah, and I'm based in Montreal, Canada, for anybody who's interested. Hi, Adam. First of all, thank you for always being there in my darkest times. Your videos have always motivated me not only to improve my art, but my life as well. Well, thank you very much, and you're welcome. My question may be a little bit strange. Uh-oh, here it comes. But where do babies come from? Okay. Well, no, I'm kidding. That's not what Wendigo asked. If somebody would give you a magic object that would allow you to relive the life and learn through the eyes of an artist from the past, whose life would you like to relive? Wow, that's a really good question. Well, I'm very open about my inspirations and stuff. And I thought about that for a second. I think it would be a toss-up between 2 particular artists whose life I feel is very relevant to my artistic learning curve as an illustrator. And if you know me at all, you know what my tastes are. It was between Frank Frazetta or Zdzisław Beksiński. This guy over here. Oh God, I have it right here. Ugh. This guy, a Polish artist. 2 of arguably my favorite artists out there. And I realized there's the reason why I would have wanted to relive the life of Beksiński isn't so much about his art. It's more about where he comes from, because he's a Polish based artist, or he was, at least. He passed away kind of tragically, actually. Because my family's from Poland, and I've never been to Poland myself, but I've always been raised with Polish kind of influences, and I've heard the Polish language spoken in my home my whole life, and it's always been a part of myself that I've always wanted to know more about. And a lot of my Polish students who are now dear friends of mine really have become kind of my informants, my consultants, and they would reach out and learn about my heritage and where my family came from and give me a little bit more of my history. For instance, that my grandmother was originally from Lvov, which used to be a part of Poland, which is now a part of the Ukraine. I didn't realize that because it was hard to track down my grandmother's origin because she passed away when she was 99. And yeah, that said, the life of Zdzisław, the life of Beksiński was, well, he was a very fascinating person as an individual. I love his personality and I loved his attitude towards art. I very much relate to his attitude towards creation, where at a certain point artistically he needed to, through a lot of different reasons, needed to distance himself from being labeled and being subjectified, where he was really about being expressive as an artist, and his art was art for the sake of being art. This is why he never labeled his artwork. And how he would create this mindset to be able to bring out the best of himself creatively. But his life, his family, his relationship with his son, who was also very well known as well, his family who, his grandmother had passed away, and then his family who passed away, and his son who died of tragic reasons, and then he dying of tragic reasons, is pretty damn dark. And pretty damn depressing when you see it. There's a movie I watched called The Last Family. It's basically a movie about him, and the actor who played Giswa did an impeccable job, and his son as well. But it's a pretty sad story, all things being said. So reliving Beksinski's life I wouldn't want to relive it for his artistic self. I would have wanted to relive it for his personal self. I was always very intrigued by his obsession of cataloging everything in video, even when it was inappropriate. I loved his sense of humor, was exceptional. Funniest guy. Polish people are generally extremely funny people. A lot of people in my family were very funny too, from the Polish side, albeit I don't speak Polish. So just exceptionally funny people, a very creative and brilliant culture that has become more and more of an influence to me growing up. That said, I think if I wanted to relive a life, it would have been Frazetta, because of his particular background and what influenced him, the people he grew up with, how he integrated photography into his art. Although Giswa also came from a photographic background, it did influence him, but he kind of rebelled against photography because of the regimented approach towards it, and he wanted to be a little bit more creatively free in that sense. But Frazetta, his relationships with his kids, I knew him, and based off of the documentaries like Painting with Fire, a documentary of Frazetta, he was a family guy first and foremost. He did not work at the expense of his family life. He did not abandon his family for work. His family came first. He would work overnight and pull all-nighters just so he could spend the day with his kids. If his kids ran in the room and disrupted his work, he would stop everything and go and play with them, which I really love knowing that about. He completely doted on his wife. She was his muse. She was his fantasy, and he expressed it in his art very unapologetically. He completely lavished affection on her. I'm sure there was some qualms he dealt with. I'm sure he had some personality flaws that made people annoyed with him. But overall, I see him as being a very good person. I also relate to him in the sense that he also suffered with thyroid issues. I have hypothyroidism. You could see from Frazetta that he had hyperthyroidism because he got Graves' eye disease. His eyes bulged out of his eyes at a certain point, and he complained about being in a lot of pain. So that's he was undiagnosed with thyroid problem for a long time. So I relate to him in a lot of different ways. And as far as artistic philosophy and his attitude towards his art, I really, really like him as a person. I think he's a really cool guy. So thank you, Wendigo. That's a kick-ass question. This next question is from Axel Santoso, who asks, what do you do when you feel like you're lost? Or maybe what do you do when you feel your, quote, fire for art isn't burning as intensely as it once did? Also, I just want you to know that you're an absolute inspiration when it comes to just humans in general. Love you so much, man. Well, I love you too. And it takes one to know one, doesn't it? So I can tell that what you said, it's coming from the heart, which means you got a big one. So that came out totally wrong. You got a big one, mate. Enjoy it. All right. Okay. Well, that's a really good question. And I actually have I've touched on it in the past in different ways. But what's important for an artist, and this kind of taps into another question I'm going to be answering later on, is that inspiration comes from many different sources. Alluding back to what I just said about Frazetta. Frazetta was into photography. Frazetta was into a lot of different things. Giswa was also into photography. He also came from an architectural background. Inspiration comes from many different sources. And I've learned through experience that if all you're ever doing is just drawing every day, if you're just sitting there and looking at your canvas every day, that resource can dry up just out of pure monotony, out of pure repetition. And to hit that reset button and expose your brain and mind to different principles, different learning principles, different communities, it pays to be a little bit of an all over the place type of artist. Because what I've learned through my own experiences is that the artistic mind is kind of universal. So the learning path that I've gone through my own experiences as an artist, as a visual artist, is that same learning curve, and I make the same realizations doing video, dance, music, playing instruments, philosophy, photography, tattoo art, jewelry design, you name it. So don't try to only look at one resource for inspiration. Maybe if you feel like you're hitting a bit of a brick wall, it's because that particular venue of exploration might be limited. So many things that I've learned as an artist that have helped me to overcome artistic challenges come from photography, come from tattoo art, come from all these different things. My last art talk, you can go check it out right now, talks all about this in depth. So that might be the case. The other thing is that might make it hard for you to get into the zone is not getting your momentum going properly. That you kind of just sit down, stare at a blank canvas and go, okay, today I'm going to create out of pure determination. And that very often falls flat. So what I like to do is get myself emotionally and even hormonally in the right headspace, meaning working at a certain period during the day. So my hormones, my actual circadian rhythm complements when it's time for me to sit down and start drawing. So having that scheduled time every day to do it is actually not a bad idea. I have a whole video. If you check out my video I did for Milanote, which is the to-do kind of visual organization app that I use all the time, which you can check out right over here, I go through that entire process. How I get myself emotionally, hormonally, productively ready to work. How I reduce friction between being in a non-artistic state to drawing. I turn on Vidya, I go into Pinterest and look up references. I get the ball rolling in all these different ways so that by the time I sit down to draw, I'm ready to go. I can just jump in without sitting there and trying to get myself emotionally ready for it. There's easy ways of doing it. Check that video out. It'll definitely help you out. Excellent question. Next is by Reunited. Hi, Adam. First, I want to thank you. Well, thank you, and you're welcome. Not only do you provide the optimal space for me to calm down and draw, we need that. That's another that answers a bit of the last question. Calming down first, right? Slowing down your rhythm. You helped me become a better artist and person with your videos. Thank you. For this, I will be forever grateful, and I don't know how I will ever repay your kindness. Well, you can send 45 easy payments of only $29.99 per month. No, thank you very much. This is your thank you. Here's my question. Do you think you will one day try a different kind of visual art like comic or anything else that comes to mind? If so, why? This ties in perfectly in with the last question. Yes, absolutely yes, all the time, any chance I can get. Video games, jewelry. I've done jewelry design for clocks and colors, photography, learning how to set up lights and sets and stuff like that, tattoo art, photography, set design, calligraphy. These are all different things I've studied and I've gotten into because they all tie into a different part of the brain. There's communities associated to calligraphy. Look up calligraphy, look up fountain pens. You learn about inks. You learn about writing styles. You learn about different cultures. You learn about Hindi calligraphy versus Japanese calligraphy versus American calligraphy, etc., etc., etc. There's this whole history behind it. Different types of inks, different types of pens. How Japanese pens, for instance, tend to be much finer because Japanese calligraphy is finer, which is also something that ties into manga and anime, where the line art tends to be a lot more precise and fine, versus, for instance, a German nib, like a Graf von Faber-Castell, is a thicker, inkier line, or an American pen, for instance. All of these things tie in together, and you make these little aha moments as an artist. They all tie in together to these principles. So, absolutely yes, excellent question. Next question. From Triad X. Good name. Good names, man. Hey Adam, hope you're well. I recently took a month off of drawing, not necessarily by choice, but because I was writing exams, and when I wanted to draw, I was too exhausted and tired. Now that it's summer, I have more time and I'm free. However, I'm finding it really hard to get back into my drawing groove. I'm starting to question everything, my love for it, the passion that I felt, why I keep making excuses not to do it. Top it all off, I've been drawing for 3 years, focusing on the fundamentals, and I love improving, but I'm starting to lose touch with my love of drawing. I'm not even old enough to be paying my own taxes and drink alcohol, but I've been so passionate about making art that I've taken a lot of steps that my art peeps haven't. I just don't know how to fill up my art tank because I'm still passionate about it, but I'm struggling to get back into it. Thank you for everything that you do. Thank you. Well, I don't know how old you are, but it sounds like you're, depending on where you're located, under 18 or under 21. The legal age in Canada is 18. And it's not a detriment. It's not a problem that you don't have access to alcohol yet, because they're starting to learn now that alcohol is as carcinogenic as cigarettes. And the lobbyists who told everybody that cigarettes were good for you, were perfectly fine and didn't cause cancer and lied, are the same people who are lobbying for alcohol as well. So it's not a bad thing that you can't drink yet. But that said, I do like to have an occasional drink myself, but that said, getting yourself back into the groove is something that I've had to face multiple times. Either A, I just needed to do other work. I had to do other jobs because at the time I couldn't find work as an artist. So I ended up working as a waiter or a cashier. Maybe I opened up a swing dance club or something like that, and I was totally in a different headspace and wasn't drawing all the time. Getting into the groove requires one step. And Ali Abdaal, who's a well-known YouTuber, actually just did an interview with Diary of a CEO, which is a YouTube show, podcast that I watch all the time. It's fascinating. Ali's somebody that I've followed quite a bit because I've been a lot into productivity apps and stuff like that over the years, and he's got a lot of that stuff himself. And in it, he talks about, I think it's like the 2-minute rule or something, or the 20-second rule. It's committing to 2 minutes of something, which is brilliant, because all you need is that one little catalyst, that one little incentive just to get the ball rolling. And 2 minutes is never 2 minutes. 2 minutes is obviously going to be 5 or 10 or 15. But once you've got that ball rolling, once you've flicked that snowball at the top of the hill, it starts to roll and grow very quickly. And if you listen to my Millinote video, my productivity video, where I talk about how to plan what you're going to paint beforehand, how to paint the kind of stuff that inspires you, and how to plan those things out so that you're not trying to figure out what to draw, and how to get yourself in the mood, and how to organize yourself so that when you sit down to draw, you're jumping right into it right away. And you combine it with this other element, which is creating a momentum for yourself, then you find yourself right back in the groove. And the best analogy for this is one that I'm actually experiencing right now. Video games. When I play video games, I don't know about you, but if you're a gamer like me, then when you game, you're not only just sitting down and playing for a bit and then putting it down and forgetting about it. You don't forget about it, do you? Because when I put the remote down, I might go in on my lunch break, I might watch, Donkey or Fighting Cowboy or Humarid X or It's Shatter, play strategy guides for Elden Ring or for Tears of the Kingdom. Haven't played Tears of the Kingdom yet. I'm still waiting for my son to finish it. Or these different games that I'm into. Right now I got Final Fantasy 16 and I'm just started to play it a little bit. But if I don't sit down and play it, if I don't keep watching stuff and watch strategy guides and all these things that keep me in the mindset, then I forget about it very quickly. I was totally digging Harry Potter, Hogwarts Legacy. Really, really amazing game. And I was playing every single day and I was watching strategy guides and questing and leveling up and all that kind of stuff. But then I got pulled away from it for work. After about a week or so, I just didn't have the desire to get back into it. I would have had to actively go start playing and then start watching a strategy guide, and that strategy guide makes me want to go and try it out for myself, etc., etc. So when you're inactive, when you're in this period of inactivity for whatever reason, maybe you're busy with other stuff, keep feeding your desire, meaning keep going on Pinterest and looking up artwork that you like. Watch a video by Marco Bucci, watch a video by Borodante, watch a video by Cynics, watch a video by Clint Kearley, watch a video by Mark Brunet. Go and watch their videos, depending on the kind of style that you want to do, on your off time, when you're just having a lunch break, and just watching Mark draw, just watching Tyler Edlin draw, just watching one of these artists draw, you start to go, oh, I want to do that too. You start to feel the D-pad in your hand, so to speak. You can feel the pen in your hand and you start to get that desire. And if you sit down to draw and you already have an idea on what you want to draw, you've already kind of planned that out on your off time, you're right back into it again. The other thing that helps too is just consistency. Don't expect that you're necessarily going to get right back into this heavy groove on your first shot. No, you're going to sit down, you're going to do a bit of drawing, maybe you're not going to keep it that time, but then do it on the second day. Do it on the third day. And that's when you're going to feel the groove kicks in. It's kind of like an addiction, like when I smoked for 20 years. And when an addict, the addiction doesn't happen when you have that first cigarette. It probably happens when you have the second one. Because the first one you didn't react to that cigarette like TV tells you. No, you go, okay, I didn't die, right? And then you do it again and you finish the cigarette. Maybe you got a bit of a nasty taste in your mouth, but hey, I handled it. I'm tough. And then somebody offers you another cigarette a couple of days later and you go, yeah, no problem. And you have that second cigarette. A week later, you're buying your first pack. That's the way it works. So it's always that second time. It's not the first. It's a little quick tip for you. There you go. Amazing question. Thank you for that. This next question. I was looking at the username, but actually I think I know who this is because it's signed. A lot of people don't sign. Ariadne from Greece. My dear Ariadne, if you're the Ariadne that I'm familiar with, who's also incidentally one of my folklore consultants because she helped me to learn a lot more about Greek philosophy and Greek culture. My question to you is, as someone whose paintings are often inspired by folklore from around the world, how do you approach cultures you are not familiar with? How do you make sure that what you are creating is respectful to the people who are part of this culture? Thank you again and have a great day. Thank you, Ariadne. Okay, well, the whole reason I like doing folklore in the first place is because I love people. And I love learning about different cultures. Folklore sometimes has to do with normal day-to-day things, but very often it taps into our deep, dark fantasies, our deep, dark fears. And therein lies kind of a raw exposition of that culture's beliefs and fears and motivations. I make a point of learning. I actually enjoy doing paintings of folklore from different cultures, like Polish culture and Filipino culture, Italian culture, Japanese, Korean, etc., etc., etc. All these different cultures, Greek, of course, because it's an excuse for me to learn them. But when I'm learning it, I don't just learn it from anywhere. I don't just go on YouTube and learn it, but I'll also, if I can, consult with people, or I'll watch videos where people actually talk about the myths about certain things and the reality, what it's like from the outside. What a Canadian would be told is Greek history and folklore versus what a Greek person would. It might be two very different things. How, for instance, the Baba Yaga or Rusalka or Kashay the Deathless, how that folklore is different in Russia, in Ukraine, in Poland, in Slovakia, how these different cultures might have adapted that. And I hear it from them directly. So I can kind of get an overall gist of what that folklore is. So when I do my own version of Mavka or of Rusalka, that I'm doing so with a respect to that culture. So it's the whole reason I do that, I like that subject, is because it does connect me to other people in other cultures and opens me up to stuff that is so cool to me. So fabulous question, Ariadne. But of course, if this is the Ariadne that I know, then she knew that was a low-hanging fruit for me, because she's one of my go-to people for Greek culture. This next question is actually quite serious. This next question is from Struby. And Struby says, "Hey Adam, what would you say to someone who achieved their dream art job and then after a while started questioning if it's actually sustainable? Turns out doing art for 8 hours a day every day is very hard and draining, especially if you work on big and well-known IPs, meaning intellectual property, and really care about doing a good job. almost feel like burnout is inevitable? Okay, that's a really good question. And I've been in this situation. I've worked for big companies, I've worked on big IPs, and I've worked for companies, which I've talked about at length in the past on my channel, in my art talks, that did burn me out, that did drain me, and I did have to take a break from. I've learned through the act of burning out, number one, what are the signs of burnout? And number two, how far you should push yourself in order to fulfill your duty as an artist for a company, show that you're ambitious without selling your soul in the process, and understanding what the signs are. The general signs of burnout, or at least the general reason for burnout, the main reason is when you feel, quote, that you are putting in an exhaustive amount of effort, a tireless, endless amount of effort into something without the reward that comes from it. So you're just giving. You're putting in, and you're not feeling that reward. When you get that first job for the big company, the reward is, holy shit, I'm in this big cool company. I'm a real hotshot. So it's an ego boost just being there. And if you're lucky, you might be working on something that you really, really like. That's something that you're emotionally invested in. But that novelty wears off. You hear a lot of people like Chris Oatley mention this in his videos. Mark Brunet mentioned this in his videos. Anthony Jones, all these different artists that have worked in these big studios. It becomes a job. It's a job at the end of the day, just like any other job, just like waiting, just like working at the gym, whatever. It's a job. And when that novelty wears off, are you still being emotionally fulfilled by the work that you're doing, or is it just labor at that point? And if it becomes only labor and they're still demanding that same amount of exhaustive effort, burnout starts to kick in very, very quickly, particularly when you're an artist or somebody who has a job like an artist that demands not only your time and your knowledge, but also your energy. Some jobs are less demanding of energy than others, but if you're working, for instance, in a PR firm as a consultant, you're dealing with crises all the time. If you're working in a hospital, you're dealing with crises all the time. You're dealing with physical pain and emotional outbursts all the time. Why do you think when you walk into a hospital it says abuse will not be tolerated? Be kind, because doctors are constantly being faced with people who are being aggressive, defensive, and entitled, sometimes for very justifiable reasons, because they're in freaking pain. But that's a very emotionally draining job. And as an artist, you're putting your heart into something. You're putting your expressiveness into this. You're putting your intellect into this. You're putting your technical skills into this. It's very draining to do on a long term. This is why I am such a strong advocate. Not because I'm a romantic. I'm also romantic, but also because I understand the long-term effects of just giving in without getting out of it at the end of it. And if you're working on a job that might be prestigious, it might pay extremely well, you might be paid extremely well. If you're not emotionally invested in your work, if you don't feel that true sense of accomplishment, if it's not a style of art or a type of project that you feel personally grateful to be a part of, and that is contributing to your life and to your career in the long run, you're gonna drain. And once you drain to a certain point, if that company has a very, very unethical demand of their artists in terms of time and effort, that's not sustainable. And unfortunately, not enough companies understand that. What ends up happening is, as a young, ambitious artist, is you keep pushing yourself until eventually, well, some people last longer than others. Some people succeed and end up moving into other things, and other people don't. And when you don't, a burnout can happen. And a burnout is basically when your body just says, time up, you're done, get out. You know, you're not working, you start getting anxiety, you start getting depression, you start getting sleep disorders, your diet starts to affect, you can get things like body aches, you can start gaining weight, you can start losing weight, you can start losing hair, you can start getting very emotionally volatile where you're crying one second and you're furious the next. You just become this real mess of a person. You become very confused. You become overwhelmed very easily by everything. The very prospect of going to work feels extremely overwhelming. It's not just going to work anymore. Now there's this incredible overwhelm just by functioning when you're experiencing burnout. You're already in a burnout if you're feeling that way. And then what happens is, if you learn the hard way, like I did, You tell your boss, I need a break. I need to leave at a reasonable hour. I cannot work until 11 o'clock p.m. every day. This is not sustainable. And your boss says, that's your choice, buddy. And if you make that choice and you get sacked, then you feel accountable. You feel like you messed up. You feel like you didn't make the cut. Do you know why you didn't make the cut if that happens? It's because you're made of flesh and bone. It's because your adrenal glands can only go so far to keep you going, and your body fails you, period. And you realize through experience that all of this time and dedication and devotion that you gave, the sacrifice that you made for your company, like a relationship, was addressed by a, oh, I'm so sorry you're going through this. I hope you get better soon. Good luck. And then the next day there's somebody else sitting in your seat. Game over. Forgotten. Everybody else is working. Life goes on. The company is still doing fine. And you're not. And you have to pick up the pieces. So you have to set your own boundaries, because if you don't, nobody's going to do it for you. And if setting a boundary gets you fired, then that wasn't the job for you. Now, of course, there's crunch time. Sometimes there's a week or two where you have to work harder, but under normal circumstances, your feelings, your energy, your health should be not only your priority, but a priority of the company. And I have personally worked for companies, which I've spoken about in the past, with bosses that recognized that I was burning out for my own personal reasons, not because of the work, and told me that I was more than welcome to take a break and come back when I was feeling up to it, with no impact on my salary or my reputation. We're going to be fine. Come back when you're feeling ready. And I had a good cry, and I took that break because I needed it for a couple of weeks, and I came back 10 times stronger, and I became that much more loyal and dedicated to the company. Their success became my personal goal. I wasn't just doing my job. So I wish more bosses could learn from that example. Thank you for an awesome question. Okay, next question is by Ink Pen Dude. Get to the point. You're an ink pen dude. I respect that. Nice and blunt. What does an art director do specifically? Excellent question. Very valuable to know that. And what does it take to be one? Also, do hand exercises to avoid damage? If you do, how often do you do them? Number one, the physical side of things, overworking things cause damage. So if your posture is bad, if you're not paying attention to your physical health, I'm going to do a video on that, more of an anatomical perspective of body health. And overworking can cause damage. So taking breaks is what's important. It's not doing hand exercises. It's not working it. It's resting it. That's the physical side of things, but that's going to be a bigger video coming up soon. As far as art directors are concerned, a lot of people have a misconception, according to me, this is my opinion, but a lot of people have a misconception on what makes a good art director. A lot of people think an art director needs to be, quote, better than everybody else. The leader. I'm the superior, so I tell you. No, I have directed artists that were 10 times better artists than me. What makes a good art director is not somebody who's effectively, objectively better at art. Although being good at art is definitely essential. You need to have a good grasp of art, and you have a good grasp of fundamentals. But not so much for the hands-on side of things, because when I was working as an art director, I usually didn't draw unless I was just showing a quick example of something for somebody. No, that's usually the job of the senior artist in a bigger company. It's the senior artist that manages the juniors. They have their own respective team. They've been working in the company for a long time, so they know the style guide. They know the general artistic philosophy of the company. And they're the ones doing that real hands-on artistic direction, and they're the ones who are generally setting the style guide and doing the quality control for all of the artists to make sure that everybody's on model. There's a consistency with everything. The art director manages the senior artists, and the art director is the one who's delegating what the company is looking for in visual terms to the senior artists, to every respective senior artist, so that they know how to develop the game. They know how to develop the film. They know how to go about it. The artistic director is on the level of management, and management would generally include a creative director who usually manages the game designers in a game studio, the artistic director who's managing artists, and then you have people like you have accountants, producers. That's usually, it's all part of the management team. And then on top of that, you have the general manager, the person who's managing that studio. And then on top of that, you have the CEO who manages all the companies. They own the company. The reason an art director exists, and this is something that you become very aware of when you face a bad art director, is not as the best artist, but as a very effective artistic communicator. You have to have the ability to communicate art. You're effectively taking in all the information from the writers, aka the creative directors and game designers. You're taking in the information from the accounting department in terms of budget. You're taking information in from the general manager in terms of what projects are coming in. You're taking in the new employees. You're the one who's doing the hiring and knowing which kind of artists are best suited for certain jobs because you understand the artistic process. And you are the filter for the rest of the team. So in a good company, a company where it's managed well, the artistic director is taking in all this information, churning it through the artistic brain, translating that into artistic fundamental terminology, which is why fundamentals are so important, and you're filtering that through in a very, very clear and concise and actionable way down to the senior artists so they know exactly how to break that down visually and communicate that down to their team. Think of it that way. You are a communicator. You are a translator. And that trickles right down to the artistic team who, if we think visually, you would imagine being like the cockroaches, the little ants at the bottom of the hill. No, those artists very often are even more artistically skilled. I have directed artists that were better than me artistically, but they didn't want to manage because they wanted to draw. So for me as a director, it was a learning experience to realize that I want to sit down and draw. I'm sitting there and watching everybody else draw, and I'm like, I'm drooling. I want to do this too. But no, that's hands off. In fact, very often it can be very insulting or a bit of a faux pas for a director to draw over other people's work. When that structure fails, like when I was working at Electronic Arts, for instance, all the producers and even the general manager wanted to play art director. And that created a ton of confusion. There was a ton of overlap. There were meetings every freaking 2 seconds. It was what you call a top-heavy company. And that means that these poor artists just trying to do their damn job, just needing time to work, are getting instructions from too many people. Because producers don't understand artistic vocabulary, they're confusing the shit out of artists. They're using terms like it needs work, which is the dumbest direction you can possibly get. They're not giving them actionable critiques. And they're eating up all their time with meetings so that these artists, in turn, don't have time to draw. And it just creates mayhem. Things fall apart. People start to quit. People start to mutiny against the company. A good company means everybody respects each other's position. And if anything artistic needs to be communicated, the wall is at the artistic director. You're not allowed to talk to my team. You talk to me and I'll talk to my team. That way there's a linear and very focused line of communication and there's no confusion. That's an artistic director. Simple but excellent question. And this one's for me. I'm going to indulge on this one from Kenzie, really. And I love your Bob Saget thumbnail, by the way. It's very funny. Simple but tough one. What's your favorite Soulsborne art direction? I don't have a favorite Soulsborne art direction. If you're thinking between, for instance, Demon Souls, Dark Souls, Sekiro, Elden Ring, Bloodborne, and now we're going to have the new one that's coming out as well. It's not the artistic direction specifically, Miyazaki's artistic direction. It is his artistic philosophy that applies to every single one of Hidetaka Miyazaki's artistic directions. He has an artistic philosophy which is very rich, which is very deep, and one which I teach. That is a philosophy that I, for obvious reasons, integrate into my own artwork as well. And once you understand Miyazaki's artistic philosophy as a whole, why he does the things he does with his characters, his creatures, his environmental designs, his set design, his atmosphere, everything that he does, you don't only appreciate the game for being a beautiful game, but you realize how rich and meaningful every decision that he makes as a creator. He really is the real deal. He really is an artistic genius. And this applies equally to Bloodborne as it does to Sekiro, as it does to everything that he does. And I don't expect that to change moving forward. He really does understand what he does. He understands his philosophy and applies it richly into everything that he produces. That's why I love him so much. The last question, because this could go on indefinitely. This is only just a touch of, these is only a handful of the questions that I got. From Martina Loscher 5355. Any thoughts on what makes a good art teacher in your eyes would be highly appreciated. Well, I'm an art teacher, so I love that question. Okay. I'll tell you what a very common misconception of what makes a good art teacher. A lot of people think a good art teacher, or people who want to get into art, being an art teacher, think that to be a good art teacher, you need to be just a good artist. No, that's only the surface of what makes a good art teacher. Art teaching, and teaching in general, in my opinion, because I think that teaching is not, the way I teach is not just exclusive to art. I love teaching everything. And I bring a lot of different things into art teaching, not just art principles per se, is a passion for teaching. Teaching is an art in and of itself, that it goes beyond being an artist. So having a love for revisiting and gently, slowly adding to and growing and chiseling away at and refining principles over and over and over and over again. I have taught, being a teacher for over 15 years, I have taught many of the same principles and taught many of the same lessons thousands and thousands and thousands of times. And I never get bored of it. Every single time, I feel like an actor who steps up to do a Broadway musical who's done this show 3 times a day, 5 days a week for 2 years on Broadway somewhere. You get more and more and more and more polished at what it is that you do. You don't get worse at it. You get more refined. You become more professional. You pick up on more nuances. There's more richness, more information that goes into every single thing that you teach. You need to have a great amount of patience, and you have to be the type of person who revels in slow, methodical, day-to-day growth. And you should always have this standard as a human being that every single time I step onto, quote, stage to give this performance, that I'm doing so in a more meaningful, more impactful, more thoughtful way. When I actually sit down to teach, I don't go, oh shit, here we go again. Same shit, different day. No, I get excited that I get to talk about these things, that I get to expand on what I've already learned. It makes me better. It teaches me things. When I'm teaching anatomy, I'm very often asked questions that I don't have an answer to. And I go, shit, good question. Let's go look it up together. And I refine my knowledge. So my students make me better at what I do as well. It's a give and take experience. When I'm teaching composition, I don't go, oh crap, I'm going to talk about the same principles over and over again. No, I'm going to be able to look at that art, analyze it, get to know the artist better, get to know the philosophy behind it, get to know their visual storytelling better, their composition, their rendering style, all of these different facets that go into understanding and exploring and decoding that artist's technique to be able to replicate it and apply it to my own work and help my student apply it to their work as well is so invigorating to me. I love the idea of being able to provide the best version of myself every single time I step up to plate, every single time I sit down to share something with somebody. I know that I'm providing them with great value. What an artist isn't is just somebody who draws well, who is showing somebody else what they do. There's a difference between demonstrating and teaching. Demonstrating is me sitting down and going, here, I'm going to show you a really good drawing. There you go, give it a shot. That's not teaching anybody anything, because that artist wants to know how you did that. And if you can't effectively break down your own work, if you don't understand what you do well enough, you can't teach it. Right? Does this mean, am I trying to discourage you from being a teacher if you don't have that experience and if you don't really understand your art well enough? No, not at all. Go for it. Get into it. If teaching, if sharing and helping other people grow is something that you're passionate about, do it. 100% do it. But do so with the goal of learning more about yourself. Do so with the goal of providing your students with the best quality truth possible that you can. and understand that over time, you're just going to slowly get better at it. In essence, being a good teacher is somebody who really, really loves and cares about what they do. They are truly passionate about it. But not only truly passionate about knowing something, but truly passionate about sharing it. I'll give you a couple of examples of teachers, not art related, that I find are some of my favorite teachers in the world that I'm completely addicted to. Neil deGrasse Tyson. Try shutting him up. Once you get the ball rolling on him, man, he will not sitting down on Diary of the CEO or Joe Rogan, and he's sitting there going off. He cuts people off all the time because wait, there's just a little bit more. I do this all the time. I shoot my mouth off so much. I realize, Jesus, that person's eyes are starting to go crossed. Shut up and let the person breathe for 2 seconds. But I get so excited about these things. And Neil deGrasse Tyson has shared this information a million times. This is nothing new to him. But to him, it's amazing. Or Rob Ballard, Dr. Ballard, who discovered the Titanic, who's been interviewed a lot lately because of what happened with the deep sea submersible that imploded very sadly. Listen to his TED Talk. I love this guy so much. My mother actually worked with him when she was working at CAE Electronics. She worked on simulators, flight simulators, and they were doing a deep sea submersible simulator, and she worked side by side with this guy, and he's as amazing in real life as he is on stage. A really remarkable guy who respects women a lot, I might add, which I respect for him a lot. And he said, I love one of his quotes, I would never hand the joystick to a deep sea submersible that's worth millions and millions of dollars to somebody who doesn't have at least 50 or 60 hours of video game experience. I would only trust a kid. And I went, fucking A, man. Yeah. I love hearing that, how he respects young artists for their integrity. He respects young people for their skills and doesn't see them as people who don't deserve the good stuff. And when he said that, you look in the crowd and like 600 15-year-old kids went, he's talking about me. There you go, you 40-year-old, you're too old for this shit. This is you can get out of here. It's like he really gives a shit about what he's teaching. Another person that I love is Johnny Harris, a YouTuber who's into history and geography, and he obsesses over maps. That fucker knows how to teach. He's teaching history, for God's sakes, a subject that I failed 3 years in a row because I hated high school history. And here I am completely addicted to his videos as he travels around these different worlds, and his editing is so impassioned and personalized, and he's so into what he's teaching. He's into the whole conspiracy of history. He's so intriguing. That's what makes a good teacher. If you're sitting down and just demonstrating how to draw, you're not even coming close to being a good teacher yet. You have to have that in your heart first. And I would say be a good teacher first and a great artist second. Although to be a good teacher, you need to be good at what you do as well. So, but definitely the teaching is the priority. My God, this was fun answering your questions. Again, to everybody who asked me these questions, thank you so much. More to come. If you didn't get to your questions, it's because there's too many of them, and or I might end up making an art talk out of it. So for everybody who chimed in, keep them coming. I'm going to do plenty more of these Q&As moving forward. They are so much fun to do, and obviously you guys really appreciate them because you keep sending me all these awesome questions. And of course, I love you all with all my heart, and happy painting. Take care.